The ballroom went quiet so fast you could hear the ice settling in the champagne glasses. I was standing at the microphone at Scioto Country Club, holding 2 pieces of paper that had just ended my marriage. My husband, I said, calmly booked 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives for next Wednesday, on our wedding anniversary. A few people chuckled nervously. Then I read the second name. Olivia Pierce. Across the room, a woman in a navy cocktail dress stopped breathing. And my husband, Daniel Whitaker, went pale. That was the moment everyone realized the engagement party had just turned into something else entirely. But to understand how I ended up standing there, you have to go back about 3 weeks. Back to a Tuesday morning that started as ordinary as any other. I live in Columbus, Ohio, on the north side near Worthington. Quiet streets, maple trees, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave when they drive past. That morning I was taking Daniel's Lexus RX in for an oil change because my Honda was in the shop getting the brakes replaced. It was nothing special, just routine. Daniel had already left for work. He owns part of a construction company downtown Whitaker and Doyle Construction. Commercial buildings mostly, warehouses, medical offices, the kind of projects that keep a man busy. I drove his Lexus to Harrison Automotive, a small garage off High Street we'd used for years. The mechanic, a guy named Rick, wiped his hands on a rag and smiled when I pulled in. "Morning, Karen. Just the usual maintenance." "Yep," I said, handing him the keys. "Oil change and whatever else it needs. Should be ready around 4. I nodded and went back to the car to grab my purse before walking across the street to wait at a diner. That's when I saw the envelope. It was stuck halfway down beside the passenger seat, wedged between the leather and the plastic trim. The kind of thick manila envelope people use for documents. At first I thought it might be receipts or work paperwork Daniel forgot. I leaned over and pulled it out. No name on the front. Just sealed. I sat there for a moment, turning it in my hands. For some reason my chest tightened. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was nothing. But I opened it. Inside were 2 printed airline tickets. First class. Destination Maldives. Departure date October 12th. My eyes moved to the passenger names. The first one made sense. Daniel Whitaker. The second one didn't. Olivia Pierce. I read it again. Olivia Pierce. Not Karen Whitaker. Not anyone I recognized. Just a name that landed in my chest like a stone. For a few seconds I sat frozen in the driver's seat. Outside, a truck rumbled past the garage. Rick's air compressor hissed somewhere in the background. Normal sounds, ordinary day. But nothing felt normal anymore. Then something else caught my eye. At the bottom of the ticket confirmation was the payment method. Mileage redemption. My stomach sank. Daniel and I had combined our frequent flyer accounts last year. My job requires a lot of travel. Conferences, supplier meetings, tourism expos. Over 3 decades, I'd collected more airline miles than I could count. Daniel had convinced me merging the accounts would make it easier when we finally took a big vacation together. We never did. But now those miles were sending him somewhere warm and beautiful with someone else. And one more detail made my throat tighten. The departure date. October 12th. Our 27th wedding anniversary? I didn't cry. Not then. I just took out my phone and photographed both tickets. Carefully, 2 clear pictures. Then I slid them back into the envelope exactly how I found them. I pushed the envelope back into the gap beside the passenger seat, closed the car door, and walked across the street to the diner. The place was called Maple Street Grill. Small booths, coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since dawn. I sat by the window and ordered a cup. The waitress Linda poured it without asking. "You look tired, honey." "Long week," I said. She nodded like she understood. Outside the window I watched traffic move along High Street. Pickup trucks. Delivery vans. A school bus stopping at the corner. Life going on like nothing had changed. But my mind kept circling one question. Who is Olivia Pierce? I pulled out my phone and zoomed in on the photo of the ticket. First-class seats. Maldives. 7 nights. I could practically picture it. White sand, blue water, overwater bungalows. Daniel had always said those kinds of trips were a waste of money. Too flashy, he liked to say. Apparently not anymore. My thumb hovered over his contact in my phone. I could call him. Right now. Ask the question directly. Who is she? Why are you going? Why our anniversary? But another thought stopped me. Emily. Daniel's daughter. I helped raise that girl after her mother died when Emily was 10. She was 27 now, recently engaged, planning her wedding for next spring. If I exploded this marriage today, what would that do to her? My finger slowly moved away from the call button. I took a sip of coffee. Cold already. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Daniel. Not yet. I was going to find out everything first. Every detail. Every lie. Because if 27 years of marriage had taught me anything, it was this. Truth has a way of revealing itself when you stay quiet long enough. That evening, Daniel came home around 6. I was already in the kitchen making chicken and rice. He loosened his tie and kissed my cheek like he always did. Hey, babe. Hey. He poured himself a glass of iced tea and leaned against the counter. Oh, by the way, he said casually, I've got a business trip next week. My hands paused on the cutting board. Yeah. Client meetings down in Jacksonville. Sounds nice. He shrugged. Work mostly. I nodded and kept chopping carrots. Which day are you leaving? Wednesday morning. October 12th. Right on schedule. I forced a small smile. Well, I said try to get some sun while you're down there. Daniel laughed. Yeah, I'll be lucky if I see daylight. I turned back to the stove before he could see my face. Because in that moment something inside me had shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. Colder. The kind of feeling you get when you realize the ground under your feet isn't solid anymore. And you're about to start digging. That night after Daniel fell asleep, I sat in the living room with my laptop. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I opened the airline loyalty website, typed in our shared account login, and pressed enter. I didn't know it yet, but the numbers I was about to see would change everything. The airline loyalty page took a moment to load. Our Wi-Fi had always been a little slow in the evenings, too many devices running at once. Daniel liked to stream sports highlights in bed, and the old router in the hallway didn't handle traffic very well. The spinning circle on the screen gave me just enough time to feel the nerves settling into something steadier. Not calm exactly. More like focus. The account dashboard finally appeared. Total balance 3,240 miles remaining. That stopped me. 3,000. That account used to hold well over 200,000. I leaned closer to the screen. The flight Daniel had booked for the Maldives showed up right away in the recent activity list. 2 seats. First class. Redeemed miles 198,000. I felt my jaw tighten. But something else caught my eye just below it. Another redemption. Then another. And another. 4 trips total in the past year. All booked through the same account. All for 2 passengers. And every single one listed the same name beside Daniel's. Olivia Pierce. I clicked the first entry. Destination Napa Valley, California. 6 nights at a resort I recognized from my work travel catalogs, Auberge du Soleil. Beautiful place. Vineyards rolling down hillsides, outdoor fireplaces, wine tastings at sunset. The second trip, Aruba. 5 nights at a beachfront resort. The third, Vancouver. Luxury hotel downtown with a harbor view. I sat there staring at the list. 4 trips. In 12 months. All booked with miles that had taken me decades to earn. And during that same year, Daniel had told me the company was struggling. Cash flow tight. Too busy for vacations. I leaned back in the chair slowly. Wow, I whispered. Not crying. Not yelling. Just stunned by the quiet math of betrayal. The worst part wasn't even the travel. It was realizing how carefully it had all been hidden. The trips were spaced months apart. Each one labeled in the mileage account as business travel redemption. Which meant if I wasn't looking closely, I'd never notice. I scrolled further down. One more detail made my stomach sink. Each trip had a linked hotel reservation confirmation number. Curious, I copied one and searched it through the travel agency portal we used at work. The booking opened immediately. Payment method, Whitaker and Doyle Construction Corporate Credit Card. So the flights came from my miles. The resorts came from Daniel's company. Meaning the romantic vacations were essentially being billed to his own business partners. I rubbed my temple. You've got to be kidding me, I murmured. If Daniel's partners ever saw this, he could lose everything. The company, his reputation. Maybe even face legal trouble. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing the laptop. Daniel shifted in bed behind me. "Karen," he mumbled sleepily. "Yeah. You coming to bed?" "In a minute." He rolled over again, already drifting back to sleep. I watched him for a moment. 27 years together. We'd built a whole life out of ordinary things. Mortgage payments, soccer practices, holiday dinners with too many casseroles on the table. I used to think marriages ended with shouting matches. Now I realized they could also end quietly, in the glow of a laptop screen. The next morning I went to work like nothing had happened. My office is on the 3rd floor of Buckeye Travel Group, a mid-sized agency downtown that handles corporate travel packages and tourism consulting. I've worked there almost 20 years. People know me there. Trust me. Which is why no one questioned it when I spent the morning reviewing reservation logs. I wasn't actually reviewing them. I was tracing Daniel's trips. Every confirmation number. Every hotel receipt. Every flight record. By lunchtime, I had a folder saved on my computer desktop labeled Quarterly Expense Review. Inside were screenshots of everything. Miles redemption records. Hotel invoices. Dates. Names. Evidence, basically. I didn't know yet if I'd need it. But I wasn't about to lose it. Around 2 in the afternoon, my coworker Jeff Sanders leaned into my doorway. "Karen, you coming to the staff meeting?" "In a minute." "You look like you've been staring at spreadsheets all day." "Haven't we all?" I said. He laughed. "Fair point." After he left, I opened one more browser tab. Google, and typed the name I'd been avoiding all morning. Olivia Pierce. The results appeared almost instantly. LinkedIn profile first. I clicked it. The page loaded with a professional headshot. A woman in her early 50s, maybe. Dark brown hair pulled neatly behind her shoulders. Sharp eyes. Confident smile. Current position: Chief Financial Officer, Whitaker and Doyle Construction. My stomach twisted. So Daniel hadn't met her at a bar. Or on a random business trip. She worked directly with him. They probably sat across the same conference table every week. That explained how the corporate card had been used. She would have had access to the financial records. If anyone questioned the expenses, she could smooth it over. A perfect arrangement. I scrolled down the profile. Education. Career history. Board memberships. Then a small section labeled family. One line there made my breath catch. Mother of Ryan Pierce. Ryan Pierce. The name stirred something in my memory. Where had I heard that before? I closed the browser slowly. Something about this felt familiar in a way I couldn't quite place. The answer arrived 2 days later. In the mail. It was a thick cream-colored envelope waiting in the mailbox when I got home. Fancy lettering on the front. I opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside was a wedding invitation. Emily Whitaker and Ryan Pierce request the honor of your presence. My heart skipped. Ryan Pierce. I pulled the invitation out fully. Engagement party next month. At Scioto Country Club. Hosted by both families. Both families. A strange chill ran through me. I went back to my laptop and reopened Olivia Pierce's profile. Stared at the picture again. Then I clicked on the image gallery attached to her page. One photo showed her standing beside a tall young man in a graduation gown. Caption underneath? Ryan Pierce, Ohio State University class of 2020. My throat went dry. Because I recognized the young man immediately. Emily had shown me pictures of him months ago. Her fiancé, which meant the woman smiling in that photo, was not just Daniel's mistress. She was Emily's future mother-in-law. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The room felt suddenly very quiet. Of all the people, I whispered. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was having an affair with the mother of the man our daughter planned to marry. And for the first time since finding those tickets, the situation stopped feeling like a private betrayal. It was something bigger. Something that could blow apart 2 families at once. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. Across the street, a neighbor was mowing his lawn. Normal life continuing. But inside my head, pieces of a much larger picture were starting to fit together. And I realized something important. If the truth came out the wrong way, Emily's wedding could collapse before it even began, which meant whatever happened next had to be handled carefully. Very carefully. Because now the stakes were a lot higher than just my marriage. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry. Anger would have been easier. What kept me awake was the quiet realization that the mess Daniel had created was bigger than just the two of us. Two families were tied up in it now. Emily, Ryan, their wedding, their future. And sitting right in the center of it all were Daniel and Olivia Pierce, carrying on an affair like the rest of us, were just background characters in their little vacation story. Around 2 in the morning, I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. The house was dark except for the stove clock glowing green. Daniel was asleep upstairs, snoring softly like he always did. I stood at the sink and stared out the window into the backyard. For a long time, I asked myself one question. Should I just walk away? Divorce him quietly? Sell the house? Let everyone else figure out their own problems? A lot of people would have done exactly that. But then I pictured Emily, 16 years old, crying on the couch after her first boyfriend dumped her. Why do people lie? She'd asked me that night. I remembered what I told her. Because they think the truth will cost them something. Standing there in my kitchen 27 years later, that memory settled something inside me. If I stayed quiet now, Daniel's lies wouldn't just cost me. They would eventually cost Emily too. And that I couldn't live with. The next few days were strange. Daniel behaved exactly the same as always. Morning coffee. Quick kiss before work. Occasional complaints about traffic on Interstate 270. If he felt any guilt about the Maldives trip, he hid it well. Thursday evening, he mentioned it again while we were watching the news. Looks like I'll be gone about 5 days next week, he said casually. Jacksonville meetings might run long. I nodded. Pack sunscreen, I said. He chuckled. Florida sun'll do that. For a second, I wondered if he believed his own lies. Or if he simply assumed I'd never question him. After 27 years of marriage, routine can make people careless. They stop imagining the other person might actually be paying attention. That weekend, Emily came over for lunch. She'd always loved our house, said it felt calmer than her apartment downtown. She brought sandwiches from Katzinger's Deli, and we sat at the kitchen table like we'd done hundreds of times before. Her engagement ring sparkled when she reached for the mustard. You'll like Ryan's mom, she said suddenly. I looked up. Oh, yeah, Olivia, she's sharp, runs the financial side of her company. I kept my expression neutral. What's she like? Emily smiled. Honestly, a little intimidating at first. But once you talk to her, she's warm. Warm. That word echoed strangely in my mind. Ryan says she's excited about the engagement party next month, Emily continued. Both families finally meeting properly. My stomach tightened. Both families. Emily noticed my quiet and tilted her head. You okay? Just thinking about how fast you're growing up, I said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You've been my mom longer than anyone else. That simple sentence nearly broke me. Because in that moment I realized something very clearly. Whatever happened next, Emily deserved the truth. But she also deserved not to have her life detonated in the process. Which meant timing mattered. A lot. 2 days later, I overheard the conversation that changed everything. Daniel was in his home office upstairs with the door partly open. I had just come in from grocery shopping when I heard him laughing. A kind of relaxed laugh I hadn't heard in a while. Yeah, he said into the phone. Next week is going to be incredible. Pause. Then, no one will bother us there. My chest tightened. Another pause. I told Karen it's Jacksonville. He laughed again. That sound traveled down the hallway like a small crack through glass. I stepped quietly away from the stairs before he noticed me. Walked back into the kitchen. Put the grocery bags down on the counter. And stared at the tile floor for a long time. That was the moment the last bit of doubt left me. The man upstairs wasn't confused. He wasn't lonely. He wasn't having some midlife crisis he regretted. He was enjoying himself. Enjoying the lies. Enjoying the secrecy. Enjoying the idea that he'd gotten away with it. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked into the living room. Sat down on the couch and began thinking carefully about what to do next. Because one thing had become clear. Confronting Daniel privately wouldn't fix this. He'd deny it. Minimize it. Promise to end things. Maybe cry. Maybe beg. And somewhere down the road the lies would start again. No. If the truth was going to come out, it had to come out in a way that couldn't be buried. And then I remembered something Emily had mentioned during lunch. The engagement party. Chateau Country Club. Both families attending. Daniel, Olivia, Ryan, Emily, and several of Daniel's business partners who were apparently helping sponsor the event. All in the same room. The idea arrived slowly. But once it did, I couldn't ignore it. If Daniel was willing to lie to everyone around him, then maybe everyone deserved to hear the truth at the same time. The following week I began quietly preparing. Not dramatic preparations, nothing out of a spy movie. Just careful steps. First, I organized all the travel records. Miles redemptions, hotel invoices, corporate credit card statements. Second, I called an old friend named Tom Gallagher who works in corporate auditing for a logistics firm in Cincinnati. I didn't tell him the whole story. Just enough. Tom, I said, hypothetically speaking, if a partner in a company used corporate funds for personal travel, what happens? He didn't hesitate. Board review, possible removal. Even if it's complicated. He chuckled. Care in accounting isn't complicated, it's math. That was good to know. Third, I waited. Because timing mattered. The engagement party was scheduled for a Saturday evening 3 weeks away, which meant Daniel's Maldives trip would happen just a few days before it. The perfect window. If I played this right, he'd walk into that ballroom thinking he'd gotten away with everything. And that's when the truth would finally step into the light. The night before his Jacksonville trip, Daniel was packing his suitcase. I watched from the bedroom doorway. Big meetings, I asked. Yeah, he said without looking up. Try not to work too hard, I said. He smiled. I won't. I almost laughed at that. But instead, I simply turned off the light and climbed into bed. Because in exactly 4 days, Daniel Whitaker was going to walk into a room full of people who trusted him. And by the time he walked out again, they wouldn't. Daniel left for the airport before sunrise on Wednesday. I heard the garage door open at 5:15, then the low hum of the Lexus backing out of the driveway. I stayed in bed until the sound faded. Then I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. For a few seconds, I just lay there listening to the quiet in the house. No shower running, no cabinet doors, no television in the other room, just stillness. That was new. I got up, tied on my robe, and went downstairs to make coffee. There was a note on the counter in Daniel's handwriting. Don't forget garbage day, back Sunday, D. That almost made me laugh. A man flying first class to the Maldives with his mistress, and he still had time to remind me about trash pickup. I stood there with the note in my hand and felt something I hadn't expected. Not heartbreak. Insult. The sheer ordinary nerve of it. I dropped the note into the kitchen trash, poured my coffee, and sat down at the table with my laptop. This was the part where fantasy and real life parted ways. In fantasy, revenge is smooth, elegant, one perfect plan unfolding without a hitch. In real life, you sit at your kitchen table in a bathrobe with cold coffee, wondering whether you're about to blow up half your family because your husband turned out to be a fool. That morning, I almost stopped everything. I opened a blank email addressed to Daniel. I wrote, I know about the tickets. I know about Olivia. Don't come home expecting this marriage to be waiting for you. Then I stared at it. Read it twice. And deleted it. Because if I sent that message while he was in the air, all I'd get back was panic and damage control, calls, texts, excuses, maybe a rushed story to Olivia and Ryan before I had a chance to do anything. No, not yet. I needed him comfortable, confident, still careless. So I closed the laptop and forced myself into the day. I changed the sheets, took out the trash, answered work emails, went to the grocery store, stood in line at Kroger next to a woman arguing over digital coupons like the world hadn't tilted sideways in my kitchen. Real life is rude that way. It keeps moving. By Thursday afternoon, Daniel had sent me 3 texts from Jacksonville. One was a photo of a bland hotel lobby. One said, meetings all day, exhausted. The third was almost funny. Wish you were here. I looked at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, safe meetings. Don't forget your blood pressure meds. That was the sort of thing a wife of 27 years says automatically. And maybe that's why the whole situation cut so deep. Long marriages aren't held together by grand gestures. They're held together by tiny habits, reminders, groceries, knowing how somebody takes their coffee and where they keep the good flashlight. Daniel had taken all of that ordinary loyalty and treated it like cheap wallpaper, just something always there in the background. By Friday morning, I had moved from hurt into planning again. I called Tom Gallagher back. "Tom, I need a favor." He laughed softly. I was wondering when the hypothetical would become real. "I've got documentation," I said. "Travel expenses, mileage, redemptions, corporate card use. Enough to show a pattern." "You showing it to a lawyer?" "Not first." He was quiet for a second. "Karen, whatever you do, stick to facts. Dates, amounts, records. Don't editorialize." That was already the plan. "Good. Facts travel farther than emotion." I wrote that down on the legal pad beside me. Facts travel farther than emotion. That became my rule. Not because I wasn't emotional, Lord knows I was, but because emotion gives people something to dismiss. Facts don't. Friday afternoon, Emily called while I was in my office. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Always." "I need help deciding between two centerpieces. Which is ridiculous, I know, but Ryan says both look the same, and I'm trying not to murder him before the wedding." I smiled despite myself. "Send pictures." She did. One had white roses and eucalyptus in a low glass bowl. The other had taller candles and hydrangeas. I studied both like national security depended on it. "I like the roses," I said. "See, that's what I said." There was a pause, then her voice softened. "You okay? You've sounded kind of tired this week." I looked out the window of my office at Broad Street traffic below. "I'm all right, just busy. You know you can tell me if something's wrong." That nearly undid me. Because she meant it. And because for 1 weak second I wanted to tell her everything right then. Dump the whole ugly mess in her lap and let the pieces land where they landed. But I could hear the hope in her voice, the life she thought she was stepping into, the simple joy of centerpieces and dress fittings, and deciding where to seat old relatives who didn't like each other. So I swallowed the truth. "Nothing you need to worry about today," I said. She exhaled. "Okay, I'm coming by Sunday, by the way. Olivia and Ryan too, just for coffee if that's all right. They want to talk engagement party details." My grip tightened on the phone. Sunday. The day Daniel would be home. And Olivia Pierce would be sitting in my house. "Sure," I said evenly. "Coffee sounds nice." When I hung up, I sat very still. That changed things. Until then, the engagement party had felt like the obvious place for the truth to come out. But now Olivia was coming into my home, smiling at my table, drinking my coffee, acting like some respectable future in-law while carrying on with my husband behind closed doors. Part of me wanted to cancel the visit. Another part wanted to see her up close. So I let it stand. Sunday afternoon arrived gray and windy, one of those Ohio fall days where the sky looks like wet cement. Daniel got home a little before noon, tan enough that even he couldn't pretend Florida conference rooms had caused it. He rolled his suitcase into the hallway and smiled. "Long week?" I said. "How was Jacksonville?" I asked. He stretched his shoulders. "Boring. Hotel food meetings, the usual." I nodded and handed him a mug of coffee. At 1:30, the doorbell rang. Emily came in first, cheeks pink from the wind, carrying a bakery box from Resch's. Ryan followed with a bottle of wine. And behind them came Olivia Pierce. She was taller than I expected, elegant in a camel coat hair, smooth makeup, tasteful in that expensive way that looks effortless because it isn't. For half a second our eyes met. And there it was. Recognition. Not of me personally, maybe, but recognition that I mattered, that I was the wife, the obstacle, the woman she'd been stepping around. "Karen," she said warmly, holding out her hand, "I've heard so much about you." I shook it. "I'm sure you have." Daniel was standing near the fireplace by then, trying to look casual and failing at it just a little around the mouth. We all sat in the living room with coffee and slices of apple cake. Emily chatted about table linens. Ryan mentioned a DJ recommendation. Olivia complimented my house. And through it all I watched. The way Daniel avoided looking directly at Olivia too often. The way Olivia spoke to him just a shade too carefully. The way Ryan seemed completely unaware. At one point, Emily said, "It's nice, isn't it, finally getting everybody together?" Nobody answered fast enough. I did. "It is," I said, "long overdue." Daniel reached for his mug and nearly knocked over his spoon. Small thing, but I saw it. So did Olivia. Good, I thought. Let them sweat a little. By the time they left, one thing had become clear. Olivia wasn't nervous because she regretted anything. She was nervous because she knew secrets are easier to manage when the wife stays off stage. Well, I was done being off stage. That evening, after Daniel went upstairs to shower, I stood in the kitchen and looked at the engagement party invitation pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet from Hilton Head. Then I pulled out my phone and called Scioto Country Club. A young woman named Melissa answered. Private events, how can I help you? My name is Karen Whitaker, I said. I'm calling about the Pierce Whitaker engagement party next Saturday. I'll be giving a short family toast and I wanted to ask about microphone access. Of course, she said cheerfully. There'll be a wireless mic at the podium after dinner. Perfect. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went to my office, opened my evidence folder and printed clean copies of everything. Boarding passes, mileage redemptions, corporate expense statements, resort invoices. I arranged them in a plain blue folder and wrote one sentence on the first page with a black pen. Facts travel farther than emotion. For the first time in weeks, my hands were steady. The night of the engagement party arrived colder than expected. Late October in Columbus can turn on you like that. One day it feels like fall, the next the wind comes off the river and reminds you winter isn't far away. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting the sleeve of my navy dress. Nothing flashy, just something simple and respectable. The kind of outfit a woman wears when she plans to say something serious in front of a room full of people. Downstairs, Daniel was already putting on his coat. You ready? He called up. In a minute. I looked at myself one last time. 27 years of marriage had left their marks, fine lines around my eyes, gray strands in my hair I no longer bothered to hide. But my face looked calm. That mattered. Anger would only make me look bitter. Calm would make them listen. I picked up the blue folder from my desk, slipped it into my purse, and walked downstairs. Scioto Country Club was glowing when we arrived. Big stone building, wide windows spilling warm light onto the parking lot. You could hear music faintly even before stepping inside. Daniel handed the car keys to the valet and offered me his arm out of habit. For a second I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But I took his arm anyway. Inside the ballroom everything looked beautiful. Round tables with white linens, candlelight flickering in glass holders, a banner near the stage that read, "Congratulations, Emily and Ryan." Emily ran toward us the moment we walked in. "Mom," she said, hugging me tightly, "you look gorgeous." "Thank you, sweetheart." Ryan followed behind her with a nervous smile. "Glad you made it," he said to Daniel. "Wouldn't miss it," Daniel replied. Across the room I spotted Olivia Pierce speaking with two men I recognized as Daniel's business partners. She looked polished, confident. If she was nervous, she hid it well. When our eyes met again across the ballroom, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Then it returned. That small flicker told me something important. She knew. Not exactly what I knew. But she knew enough to be uneasy. Good. Dinner passed slowly. Chicken piccata, roasted potatoes, green beans with almonds. I barely tasted any of it. Daniel chatted with his partners about a new development project on the west side of the city. Something about warehouse space near the highway. Every now and then he glanced toward Olivia. Not often, but often enough. Across the table, Emily kept squeezing Ryan's hand under the tablecloth. The two of them looked happy in that young, hopeful way people do before life teaches them how complicated things can get. That made this harder, but also necessary. After dessert, the band quieted down. Emily's father, Daniel, stood up first to make a speech. He walked to the podium with the same confident stride he'd used for years at company presentations. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Thank you for being here to celebrate two wonderful young people." Polite applause. He spoke for several minutes about family love and the future. Listening to him talk about honesty and commitment almost made my jaw hurt. Then he finished. "And now," he said, smiling toward the crowd, "I believe Karen wanted to say a few words as well." He looked genuinely relaxed, which meant he had no idea what was coming. Perfect. I stood up slowly. The room was warm, but I felt a cool steadiness in my chest as I walked to the podium. Melissa, the event coordinator, handed me the wireless microphone. "Whenever you're ready," she whispered. I nodded. Then I turned to face the room. For a second, I just looked at everyone. Emily, Ryan, Daniel, Olivia, Daniel's business partners, friends, relatives, people who had trusted us for years. Then I spoke. Before we celebrate Emily and Ryan, I said calmly, I want to thank Daniel for planning such an interesting trip next week. Daniel's smile flickered. What trip? Someone joked from the back. I opened my purse and pulled out 2 pieces of paper. First-class tickets to the Maldives, I said, holding them up. A small ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. People assumed it was some kind of anniversary surprise. Then I added the next sentence. Scheduled for our wedding anniversary. The laughter faded. Daniel's face tightened slightly. I continued. The passengers listed on the reservation are Daniel Whitaker and Olivia Pierce. The room went completely silent. You could hear someone set a fork down against a plate. I turned slightly toward Olivia. She had gone very pale. Daniel stepped forward. Karen, he said quietly, maybe this isn't... I raised one hand gently. I'm almost finished. Then I opened the blue folder and placed several documents on the podium. These trips weren't just paid with airline miles, I said. I lifted one of the pages. They were also charged to Whitaker and Doyle Construction as business expenses. Daniel's partner, Mark Doyle, stood up from his table. Daniel, he said slowly, what is she talking about? I handed him a copy of the statements. 4 trips in the past year, I said. Napa Valley, Aruba, Vancouver, and the Maldives next week. Mark's eyes moved across the paper. His expression darkened. Across the room, Ryan looked at his mother. Mom. Olivia said nothing. Daniel tried again. This is a misunderstanding. No, I said calmly, it's accounting. That line landed harder than anything else I'd said. Because numbers are difficult to argue with. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then whispers started spreading through the room like wind through dry leaves. Daniel's other partner leaned toward Mark, reading the documents over his shoulder. Emily looked from me to her father, confused. Dad. Daniel didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Everything that needed to be said was already printed in black ink. I stepped away from the podium. My heart was pounding now, but my voice had stayed steady. And that was enough. Behind me, the room began to fill with voices. Questions. Shock. Anger. I didn't stay to watch. I walked quietly toward the exit. Outside, the cold Ohio air hit my face like a deep breath after being underwater. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But something solid. The truth was out. And it no longer belonged only to me. The first thing I noticed outside the country club was how quiet the parking lot felt compared to the ballroom. Inside, voices had started rising, chairs, scraping, people talking over one another, someone asking Daniel a question loud enough that it carried through the hallway. Out here, it was just cold air and the hum of the highway somewhere in the distance. I walked down the stone steps slowly. My hands were shaking now that it was over. That surprised me. I'd been steady inside, calm, focused. But once the moment passed, the adrenaline drained out of my body like someone pulling a plug. I stood near the edge of the parking lot and wrapped my coat tighter. For 27 years, my life had been built around one man. And now that life had cracked open in front of 100 witnesses. Strangely, I didn't feel broken. Mostly I felt tired. And a little relieved. Daniel didn't come outside. Not right away. Instead, a few minutes later, the doors opened and Emily hurried down the steps toward me. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Not anymore. Karen, she said quietly. She hadn't called me Mom. That hurt a little, but I understood why. I waited. You knew, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. For how long? About 3 weeks. She looked down at the pavement for a moment. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I took a slow breath. Because I needed to be sure. Emily nodded slowly. That's fair. She glanced back toward the building where the voices were still carrying through the open doors. Ryan appeared in the doorway behind her, but stayed inside, giving us space. Emily rubbed her hands together against the cold. I asked Dad if it was true. And he didn't answer. That said everything. We stood there quietly for a moment. Then Emily said something I hadn't expected. I'm glad you said it tonight. I looked at her. You are... She nodded. If I'd married into that family without knowing, that would have been worse. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I reached out and squeezed her shoulder. You're stronger than you think. Emily gave a small, tired smile. I learned from you. That almost undid me. But before I could respond, Ryan stepped outside. He looked like a man who had just discovered the floor beneath his feet wasn't solid. Karen, he said gently, I'm sorry. For what? For all of it. I nodded. None of this was your fault. He looked back toward the ballroom where his mother still hadn't emerged. I need to talk to her, he said quietly. That sounds reasonable. Ryan hesitated. Then he said something that surprised me. You handled that with more dignity than anyone in that room deserved. I smiled faintly. That's the advantage of being older. You learn that yelling rarely improves a situation. He gave a small laugh. Emily hugged me once more before they both went back inside. I watched the doors close behind them. And just like that, the next chapter of their lives was beginning in a very different direction than the one they'd expected. 3 months later, winter settled over Columbus. The trees outside my new townhouse were bare, their branches dark against the pale sky. Yes, new townhouse? Daniel and I had separated almost immediately after the party. The divorce process moved quickly once the company investigation began. Mark Doyle and the other partners didn't waste time. The financial records spoke for themselves. Daniel was forced to step down from Whitaker and Doyle Construction before the end of November. Olivia Pierce resigned the same week. After that, the affair stopped being a secret and started being a cautionary tale around the local business community. I didn't follow the details too closely. By then, I had my own life to rebuild. The townhouse I moved into sits on a quiet street near Upper Arlington. Smaller than our old house, but comfortable. The kind of place where you can hear the wind against the windows at night and not feel lonely. One Saturday afternoon in January, Emily came over with takeout from North Star Cafe. We sat at the kitchen table eating salads and laughing about how terrible my attempt at assembling IKEA furniture had been. Ryan joined us later. The two of them were still together. They'd postponed the wedding for now, which was probably wise. At one point, Emily looked around the townhouse and smiled. You seem peaceful here. I am. She tilted her head thoughtfully. You know something strange. What's that? I thought that night at the country club would destroy everything. And she shrugged. Instead, it just cleared away a lot of lies. That was exactly right. Not destruction. Cleaning. Messy cleaning, sure, but necessary. In February, my boss at Buckeye Travel Group called me into his office. Karen, he said, sliding a folder across the desk, we've got an opening in our senior consulting division. Corporate travel oversight. I looked through the paperwork. More responsibility. Better pay. More travel. You interested, he asked. I smiled. Yes. A month later, I was boarding a flight to Honolulu for a conference. Not the Maldives. But still beautiful. As the plane lifted off from John Glenn Columbus International Airport, I looked out the window at the patchwork of Ohio fields disappearing beneath the clouds. And I realized something simple. For weeks, I'd thought the envelope in Daniel's car had destroyed my life. But that wasn't true. It had just shown me the truth sooner than I might have found it otherwise. Sometimes the worst discoveries turn out to be the most honest gifts. Not because they're pleasant, but because they give you the chance to start again without pretending. If you've ever faced a moment where the truth felt too heavy to speak out loud, you're not alone. Sometimes dignity means walking away quietly. And sometimes it means standing up and letting the truth do its work. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who believes honesty still matters.